A young traveler sets out to explore the world, full of dreams and curiosity. She checks into a hotel, calls her parents one last time, and then vanishes without a trace. Weeks later, her body is discovered in the most chilling place imaginable, a rooftop water tank. What really happened to Elisa Lam? Was it an accident, a crime, or something far darker? This is the story that shocked the world and still haunts us today. In February 2013, a young Canadian student named Elisa Lam arrived in Los Angeles with big dreams and a curious heart. She was only 21, shy but adventurous, and she wanted to see the world beyond Vancouver. Elisa loved writing online, sharing little pieces of her journey, her thoughts, and even her struggles with mental health. For her, traveling was about finding herself. She checked into the Cecil Hotel in downtown Los Angeles, a building with a long, dark reputation. To Elisa, it was just a cheap place to stay. To others, it was infamous, a hotel where countless suicides had happened, where murders took place, and where even serial killers once lived. But Elisa didn't know all of that. To her, it was just a stop along the way. On January 31st, Elisa called her parents like she always did. She promised she'd keep in touch, as she had throughout her trip. But that was the last time they ever heard her voice. The next day came and went. No call. Then another day. Her parents grew worried, and soon they called the Los Angeles police to report her missing. Detectives searched the hotel, spoke to staff, and asked around the neighborhood. Elisa's belongings were still in her room. She hadn't just walked away. Friends said she was sweet, though sometimes withdrawn, and that she lived with bipolar disorder, a part of her life she never hid. But nothing explained where she had gone. 2 weeks later, police decided to release something unusual. Surveillance footage from one of the hotel's elevators recorded the night she vanished. What the world saw was deeply unsettling. Elisa stepped inside the elevator and pressed several buttons. Then she peeked out nervously as if someone was following her. She jumped in and out, waved her arms strangely, and at times seemed to be talking to someone invisible. The video made no sense, and yet it spread across the internet like wildfire. Millions of people watched it, replaying every second, trying to figure out what had happened to this young woman. Was she scared? Was she hallucinating? Was there someone just out of frame? For now, there were no answers, only questions. And, while guests at the Cecil Hotel carried on with their stays, none of them knew the terrible secret the building was hiding just above their heads. By mid-February 2013, almost 3 weeks had passed since Elisa Lam disappeared. Her face was everywhere, on posters, in the news, and across social media. Police had searched the streets of Los Angeles, scoured the hotel with dogs, and questioned anyone who might have seen her. But Elisa was still missing, and hope was starting to fade. Inside the Cecil Hotel, though, something else strange was happening. Guests began complaining about the water. Some said it had low pressure, others noticed it was discolored. A few even admitted, hesitantly, that it tasted funny. Imagine brushing your teeth or drinking from the tap, only to realize the water tasted foul. At first, hotel staff brushed off the complaints, blaming the old pipes. But eventually, they sent a maintenance worker to check the rooftop water tanks. What he found would haunt him forever. On the morning of February 19th, he climbed up the ladder, opened one of the heavy black lids, and froze. Inside, floating in the murky water, was the body of a young woman. It was Elisa Lam. The discovery shocked the entire hotel. Guests were horrified as the news spread. Many of them had been drinking and bathing in that same water. News cameras swarmed the building, and reporters filmed the rooftop tanks where Elisa had been found. How had she ended up there? And why? The questions only deepened. The rooftop wasn't supposed to be accessible. Locked doors and alarms blocked the way. Even if Elisa somehow reached it, lifting the lid and climbing inside the tank would have been nearly impossible on her own. Police struggled to explain it. Then came the autopsy results. The coroner ruled her death an accidental drowning. No alcohol, no drugs, no signs of struggle. Just traces of her prescribed medications, suggesting she might not have been taking them consistently. That led some to think her mental health could explain her strange elevator behavior, and maybe even her death. But the idea didn't sit well with everyone. For many, the story was far too bizarre. The elevator video, the locked rooftop, the water complaints. It all felt like pieces of a puzzle that didn't fit together. Online, theories exploded. Murder, cover-ups, even supernatural forces. The Cecil Hotel had a history soaked in tragedy, and Elisa's death felt like another dark chapter. What really happened that night? Nobody knew. But one thing was certain. Elisa Lam's story was no longer just a missing person case. It had become a mystery that the whole world wanted to solve. After Elisa's body was discovered, the investigation kicked into overdrive. Detectives now faced an impossible puzzle. A young woman had vanished, been found in a rooftop water tank, and the only clue they had was a strange elevator video that made no sense. The world was demanding answers, and the police were under intense pressure to deliver them. First, they considered foul play. Could someone have murdered Elisa and dumped her body in the tank? It was the most obvious explanation. Investigators combed through hours of hotel surveillance footage, looking for anyone who might have followed her to the roof or entered her room that night. But nothing came up. No stranger trailing her, no suspicious figure. The only footage of interest remained that unsettling elevator video. Then came another angle, her mental health. Elisa had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, something she often wrote about openly online. The toxicology report showed she had some of her medication in her system, but not all of it. Experts suggested she might have skipped doses, which could trigger paranoia, disorientation, or hallucinations. Suddenly, her bizarre behavior in the elevator looked like it might fit that explanation. Maybe she was in the middle of a severe episode. But there was still the biggest question. How did she get into the water tank? The roof wasn't supposed to be accessible. Locked doors, alarms, and sheer height made it difficult. The only alternative was the fire escape, but climbing it in the middle of the night was dangerous. Even if she reached the tanks, how did she lift the heavy metal lid and climb inside without help? Hotel maintenance staff insisted that guests couldn't have done it easily. These unanswered questions left a vacuum, and the internet rushed to fill it. Online sleuths pored over every detail. Some swore she had been murdered, and the police were covering it up. Others pointed to the Cecil Hotel's dark history, claiming Elisa had fallen victim to the building's curse. Conspiracy theories spread like wildfire, some grounded in logic, many not. Her family, meanwhile, was left heartbroken and frustrated. The official ruling was accidental drowning due to bipolar disorder. But that conclusion didn't satisfy them or anyone else paying attention. Instead of clarity, the case only seemed to grow more complicated. Elisa Lam's death wasn't just a tragedy anymore. It was a haunting mystery, the kind that sticks in your mind long after you first hear it. To truly understand why Elisa Lam's case captured so much attention, you have to know about the place where it all happened. The Cecil Hotel. Back in 1927, the Cecil opened its doors as a grand, luxurious destination. The lobby was beautiful. Marble, floors, stained glass, a place where the wealthy could relax in the heart of Los Angeles. But the glamour didn't last. When the Great Depression hit, the neighborhood crumbled. Skid Row grew around the hotel, bringing crime, drugs, and poverty. The Cecil slowly turned from a shining jewel into a dark shadow. By the mid-20th century, the hotel had earned a reputation it could never shake. People began calling it the Suicide Hotel, after so many guests ended their own lives there. But suicides weren't the only tragedies. In 1964, a kind woman named Pigeon Goldie Osgood, famous for feeding birds in the park, was raped and murdered in her room. Her killer was never caught. Then came the infamous residence. In the 1980s, serial killer Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, lived at the Cecil while terrorizing Los Angeles. Years later, another killer, Jack Unterweger, also stayed there while continuing his crimes. The building seemed to draw darkness to it, like a magnet for tragedy. So when Elisa Lam checked in, she unknowingly became part of that history. Her disappearance and death only added fuel to the belief that the Cecil was cursed. Paranormal investigators swarmed the place, convinced the walls themselves held secrets. Tourists came just to ride the same elevator Elisa was last seen in. The hotel's reputation grew bigger than ever. This time in the age of the internet, the management tried to rebrand. They renamed it Stay on Main to distance themselves from its haunted past. But no matter what name it carried, the Cecil Hotel's story couldn't be rewritten. Too much blood, too many tragedies, too much darkness had seeped into its walls. For many, Elisa wasn't just a victim of circumstance. She was the latest chapter in a building's cursed legacy. A legacy that made people wonder, was the Cecil just another rundown hotel in a bad neighborhood? Or was there something truly sinister about it? Either way, Elisa Lam's death ensured the Cecil Hotel would never escape its past. Instead, it became a symbol of mystery, tragedy, and unanswered questions. If the elevator video hadn't been released, Elisa Lam's story might have stayed a quiet police case, known only to her family and a handful of detectives. But once that footage went online, everything changed. Millions of people around the world watched it. Some saw a terrified young woman peeking nervously into the hallway, as if she was being chased. Others thought she was playing, moving her hands in strange ways, almost like she was talking to someone we couldn't see. And then there were those who believed something darker was happening, that Elisa was caught in the grip of something supernatural. The internet did what it always does. It went into overdrive. YouTube channels, Reddit threads, and blogs picked apart every frame of the video. People slowed it down, zoomed in, tried to count how many buttons she pressed. They turned her final moments into a puzzle to be solved. It didn't stop there. Online detectives dug into Elisa's life, uncovering her Tumblr blog where she wrote about her struggles with bipolar disorder and loneliness. Some sympathized, seeing a young woman who was open and vulnerable. Others twisted her words, trying to find hidden meanings, as if her posts were secret clues about her death. And then came the strange coincidences. People pointed out how her death resembled the horror film Dark Water, where a girl's body is found in a rooftop tank. Others noticed that around the same time, there was a tuberculosis outbreak near Skid Row, and the test being used for it was called the Lam-Elisa test. To many, these eerie overlaps felt like more than coincidence. But the internet obsession also had a darker side. A death metal musician named Morbid, who had once stayed at the Cecil and posted creepy videos online, suddenly became the target of online mobs. Even though he wasn't in the country when Elisa disappeared, people flooded him with hate, accusing him of murder. His career and mental health were shattered, all because of baseless theories. Elisa's case had turned into something bigger than the truth. It became entertainment, a story people consumed late at night on forums and YouTube, searching for answers they would probably never find. For Elisa's family, it was heartbreaking. While they grieved, the world turned her final days into a mystery game. The line between genuine concern and morbid fascination blurred, and the real tragedy, the loss of a young woman's life, was almost forgotten. It's been more than 10 years since Elisa Lam was found in that rooftop water tank, but her story has never really gone away. In fact, it's only grown. Documentaries, podcasts, YouTube videos, and endless online theories keep her case alive. Netflix even made a series about it, pulling in millions of viewers. Yet despite all the attention, The truth of what happened to Elisa remains just as blurry as the day she was found. For her family in Vancouver. That's the hardest part. To them, Elisa wasn't a mystery or a headline. She was a daughter, a sister, a young woman with dreams of exploring the world. She loved writing, connecting with strangers online, and searching for meaning in life. She once wrote that she wanted to leave a mark on the world. Tragically, she did. But not in the way she ever imagined. Her case forced people to think about bigger issues: mental health, safety for solo travelers, and the way the internet consumes tragedy. Some saw her as a symbol of how fragile life can be, especially when mental illness is involved. Others pointed out how quickly her death became a form of entertainment, with strangers dissecting her last moments like pieces of a puzzle. And then, of course, there's the Cecil Hotel. No matter how many times it's been rebranded or remodeled, it will always be tied to Elisa's story. Its dark history of suicides, murders, and serial killers ensures that. To some, it's just a cursed building, destined to collect tragedies. To others, it's a reminder of what happens when vulnerable people slip through the cracks in a city. That often looks the other way. But at the heart of it all is Elisa, a young woman whose story refuses to fade. Maybe that's because her case has no satisfying ending. No villain caught. No clear explanation, just a haunting video, a rooftop water tank, and questions that may never be answered. Elisa Lam's legacy is more than mystery. It's a reminder of how quickly a life can be lost, of how deeply the internet craves answers, and of how some stories stay with us forever, not because they're solved, but because they never are. In the end, Elisa Lam remains more than a mystery. She was a daughter, a sister, and a young woman whose life was cut short far too soon. The world may never know exactly how she ended up in that rooftop water tank, but her story lives on, reminding us of the thin line between truth and unanswered questions. Some mysteries fade with time. Elisa's has only grown stronger, echoing in the halls of the Cecil Hotel, and in the hearts of all who still search for the truth.